So I just watched Pyper's video called Being Witch, and it's a really good video, by the way. But it sort of got me thinking about some stuff. Um, she talked about a lot of things that I kind of covered in my last video, but she talked about them in a kind of different way, and it got me thinking about other stuff that I had not talked about. Um, so I'm going to try and cover some of that right now. One of the things she was talking about is what does it mean to be a witch? And immediately she was talking about what do you call yourself? I will say right off the bat that I consider myself a witch, pagan, and a Wiccan, but I don't ever call myself all three of those things. I call myself a pagan, mostly because most of the people, whenever you say you're a witch to somebody, for the most part, they kind of think you're crazy until they sort of know you better and know what you're talking about. And if I call myself a Wiccan, I sort of get a bad reaction from a lot of people who don't know what that actually means and seem to associate it a lot with Satanism. So usually what I say first is that I am pagan. If that goes over well, we get into the specifics, and then I'll say, well, more or less I'm Wiccan, which is X, Y, and Z, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that's what that was a lot of the time. So I tend to go in a certain order with how I talk about that. The last on that list would be witch, just because that seems to be the one that most people have the hardest time sort of taking in. Not that they don't eventually get what you're talking about, but if someone asks you, what are your religious practices and beliefs? And you're like, well, I'm a witch. They're like, most of the time they look at you like, and you're a crazy person. So start here, work my way there. That's how I go about that. But I also just kind of feel uncomfortable using those terms in general, not because I'm uncomfortable with them, but because I know other people are. Like my family, for example. They're very understanding with me calling myself pagan. My mom's really understanding even if I call myself Wiccan, but I'm pretty sure if I went around calling myself a witch, virtually all of my family would probably be at least somewhat uncomfortable with that, just because of the associations most people in society have with that word. So it's not that I don't like it, it's not that even my family doesn't like it. It'd be more like everyone else would think one thing when it's really something else, if that makes sense. So that's how I feel about that. The other stuff that she was covering in her video had a lot to do with your practice. And she was talking about how when she had started and first become Wiccan, pagan, witch, however you want to say, she was constantly doing spells, constantly. Her book of shadows, she showed it, it was like this thick, it was huge. And she said it took her several years to do that, but that she was constantly putting stuff in there, just anything and everything. And I was watching that, just thinking to myself, I never did that. And I realize a lot of people do. Like, I've seen a lot of other videos where people do too. I think maybe I was just really weird. I didn't do that. I don't know why. Can't really find a good reason why. I have always been an obsessive reader, but I'm very skeptical. I, to this day, read books by well-respected authors, and I'm like, I think that's a bunch of crap. I'm not going to do that. I don't agree with that. So I'm, like, really picky, I guess, about things. But I sort of just store everything in here. I don't really put a whole lot in a book of shadows. Like, I have one now. I will show it to you now because it's right next to me. But I just started this one about a year ago because I decided it was important to do. It is a 3-ring binder. There's not, and it looks thicker than it really is because I have protective covers on every single page that's in here. Can you see how shiny they are? There's like these little coverings on all of them. And a lot of what's in there is stuff I've compiled from books for the most part. And a lot of them are reference sheets so that I don't have to have the whole book with me. One of the things in there, a lot of them comes from Scott Cunningham stuff actually, but like if I need, trying to think of what I got. If I need an herb for healing, I flip to my little section that's got those lists and I find healing, and then I look at all the herbs under it. I usually try and find an herb that has several associations with sort of the overall feel, so healing and protection and purification maybe. Like, what herb can I find that fits all of these things? That's the one I'm going to go for. So I sort of like have reference sheets in there. But, that being said, I never went through that phase where I did a bunch of spells and did a bunch of just anything like that, actually. I've probably done maybe 10 spells in my whole life, like full-blown, complete ritual cast sorts of things. Not because I don't like them, but I feel like I don't need to a lot of the time. Doing other things on a smaller scale seems to work. When I do that, it's because it's very serious and I really want to make sure I've got absolutely everything covered. But I don't do that too often. Obviously not until very recently anyway, just because of what I've said in some of my other videos. So I haven't done too much of that yet. And I personally don't feel the urge to do that because, like I said, most of what I do, I can do without being in the circle and doing a full-blown ritual and all of that. My personal practice is very, very day-to-day life kind of stuff. Not necessarily something that's super ceremonial by any means. Most of what I do is very practical kind of things. I'm trying to think of a good way of... Okay, here's a great way to explain this. In 2 days from now, it is Lammas. I like to call it Lughnasadh. I just like Lugh a lot, so I like to call it that. But for that day, what I'm going to do to celebrate, I'm not going to cast a ritual circle. I usually don't. And my personal practice, I celebrate all 8 holidays. The only one that I tend to get really, really, really into is Halloween, just because I like Halloween. Like, it's not even just the pagan side of Halloween. I just love Halloween. So that's part of why. But for this particular holiday, I will be getting up and watching the sunrise. Hopefully that's going to work out because I just found out today that my fiancé is actually going to come later this evening and stay through and leave sometime Wednesday. So I'm not sure if he's going to be super thrilled if I want to get up at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning. See how that goes. But I want to do that. I want to go out to the park. And if I can get him to go with me, that would be awesome because we can walk quite a distance, but we can walk to the park, walk around the park, and walk back, which would be really cool, as long as it's not ridiculously hot. I plan to make scones. I'm gluten intolerant. I don't know if I've said that on one of these videos yet or not, so I'll say it now. That means that I have to have specially made everything, virtually. I can't have normal, like, wheat flour stuff. So I have to make specialty things. So when most people are like, oh, I'm going to bake bread, I can't really do that. I don't like a lot of gluten-free breads. They just don't taste very good. So I like to make chai spice scones whenever I do some kind of ritual thing where I want to incorporate that. That's what I make. So I will be making some of those that day. I've decided I'm going to I have a very tiny garden on my back deck, and my tomato plant finally started turning red. Like, I think I have like 7 or 8 tomatoes on there. One of them came off like less than a week ago. I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 days ago. it was ready to be picked. So I'm going to take that first tomato and set that on my altar as sort of a libation, I guess is what you would say, to Lugh, because this is a harvest festival. So a lot of what I plan to do throughout the day, it's also the full moon, which I think is really, really exciting. Like, I always get super pumped when special days for me, whether they're like pagan holidays or just birthdays or whatever, I get super excited when it's on a full moon. Not sure why, I just think it's really cool. So I find it very exciting that this will be on the full moon. I'm going to put some of my stuff outside on deck to charge it, cleanse it, do all that good stuff. And probably going to spend quite a bit of time outside in the evening, tomorrow evening, not necessarily that day, because my fiance will be here and I just like being outside on my back porch. So I'm going to do that. But those are the kinds of things that I plan to do. There's nothing super fancy about that, really. It's more like observing the holiday, observing nature, observing the changing of the seasons, the harvest stuff. That's how I practice my faith, my religion. I am very much into observing the holidays. But, as you can see, that's not necessarily a full-blown thing. I'm usually just very mindful throughout the day what the day is. I talk to the gods, maybe not out loud if I don't have the opportunity for that without upsetting other people. But I do like, I'm sorry, I have hair in my eye. I do like meditation type where I'll sit at my altar quietly and talk to them. That's just kind of how I practice. I don't dislike the ceremonial aspect, but I don't feel that it is necessary all of the time. For me, as I said in that other video, paganism, Wicca, witchcraft has always been a lot more about observation and growth than it has anything else. So I will continue probably to practice like that. I just feel like it's kind of strange that I never went through that phase where I did feel like there was a great need to do that. I've always been kind of weird in that aspect, I guess. So there's my awesome, or not so awesome, example of how I practice. So maybe that gives you a slightly better idea of what I do and what I like to focus on. I do like divination a lot, but I don't do it too frequently. I will also do that. Forgot to mention that one. I will do that on Wednesday. But that's probably about it. Unless I can think of something else just spur of the moment that I'll do. But that's what I'm planning to do ahead of time. So, yay. Feel free to share with me some of the stuff that you plan to do, or tell me that something I'm doing is maybe silly and that you have a better idea, because I would be happy to hear it.